Repetition compulsion refers to the unconscious drive compelling individuals to reenact unresolved conflicts and traumas from early life within their adult relationships. Unlike simple habit or preference, this psychological phenomenon operates beneath conscious awareness, continuously steering the person toward familiar, yet unsatisfying relational patterns. The compulsion reveals itself when someone repeatedly chooses partners who mirror the emotional dynamics of their childhood environment, whether through abandonment, criticism, neglect, or unpredictable affection. The term repetition compulsion emerged from Freud's observation that individuals often replay distressing experiences not merely to master them, but because the unconscious mind seeks completion of unresolved psychic business. At its core, repetition compulsion functions as an unconscious effort to achieve the mastery that eluded one in formative years. A child who felt emotionally abandoned might grow up drawn to unavailable partners, unconsciously hoping this time to secure the attention and affection denied in childhood. The repetition of abandonment scenarios offers an illusory opportunity to rewrite history. If the partner finally commits, the inner wound may seem healed. However, because the compulsion originates from unconscious memory rather than deliberate choice, the individual seldom recognizes the reenactment. Instead, each new relationship feels infused with a mysterious magnetic pull, compelling the person toward familiar pain. Freud distinguished repetition compulsion from mere memory. While memory recalls past events, repetition compulsion enacts them. The individual does not simply remember betrayal, they unconsciously seek it out. This enactment serves a dual function. It briefly relieves psychic tension by externalizing internal conflict, yet it also perpetuates distress by preventing true resolution. A relationship cycle begins with attraction, often fueled by unconscious identification with the partner's behavior, progresses through an illusion of closeness, and inevitably deteriorates as the familiar conflict recurs. The ending, whether through breakup or emotional distancing, triggers a temporary sense of relief, followed by renewed longing, and the cycle begins anew with the next partner. The compulsion's power derives from its grounding in early object relations, the mental representations of caregivers, and their emotional availability. If a first caregiver oscillated between warmth and coldness, the adult psyche internalizes that pattern as the template for love. Future partners, regardless of their actual behavior, unconsciously assume roles in the script, warm at times, distant at others. The adult repeats scenes from childhood, unconsciously searching for the missing element, consistent warmth or dependable support. Because this reenactment unfolds below the threshold of conscious intention, ordinary reflections on compatibility or shared values never dislodge the compulsion. Rational assessments yield to unconscious longing. Moreover, repetition compulsion intertwines with other defense mechanisms such as projection. An individual confronting internalized shame regarding unworthiness may project that same feeling onto a partner, perceiving imagined flaws that echo the original rejection. This projection then validates the unconscious expectation of abandonment or betrayal, reinforcing the compulsion. Denial may also emerge, allowing the person to overlook red flags because they unconsciously desire the familiar pain. Displacement manifests when suppressed resentment toward the original caregiver transfers onto the current partner, masquerading as anger over present behavior. Each defense serves the compulsion by maintaining the unconscious script and preventing conscious disruption. Repetition compulsion also operates in cycles of fleeting idealization followed by devaluation. The initial attraction phase often involves intense idealization, seeing the partner as perfect, capable of delivering the love once missing. This phase mimics the child's initial dependence on a caregiver. As the relationship matures, inevitable imperfections surface. Instead of integrating these into a realistic picture, the unconscious triggers devaluation, perceiving the partner as flawed or unloving. This devaluation reflects the child's eventual disappointment when the caregiver failed to meet expectations. The cycle of idealization and devaluation repeats in each new relationship, cementing the pattern. A crucial element in understanding repetition compulsion lies in the concept of working through. Freud asserted that merely reliving past trauma within new relationships does not constitute resolution. True mastery requires bringing the unconscious conflict into consciousness, exploring it in a reflective, analytical context. Without such working through, often facilitated by therapeutic intervention, the compulsion remains trapped beneath awareness, ensuring its perpetual replay. The individual feels both powerless and mystified by their own relational choices, unaware that the unconscious script directs their love life. Repetition compulsion cannot be eradicated by willpower alone. Its roots lie in the unconscious dynamics established in early childhood. Attempting to avoid its pull without understanding its origin usually fails. Instead, the individual may experience a vacuum or distress when a potentially healthy relationship lacks the familiar elements of conflict and withdrawal. The compulsion thus exerts its influence even in relationships that do not immediately fall into the toxic pattern, subtly sabotaging satisfying connections in favor of those that feel psychologically recognizable. Recognizing the nature of repetition compulsion marks the first step toward breaking free from chronic, unsatisfying relationships. Awareness of the unconscious drive reframes past relationship failures not as personal inadequacies but as reenactments of an ancient script. This reframing shifts blame away from surface events and toward the need to address underlying dynamics. By acknowledging that each new heartbreak serves a deeper, unconscious purpose, an attempt to master earlier wounds, the individual gains the possibility of stepping outside the cycle rather than remaining a passive player. This understanding also illuminates the paradox of familiarity. Toxic relationships feel strangely comforting because they enact known emotional scripts. Even as the conscious mind seeks harmony, the unconscious mind yearns for the familiar conflict, creating inner turmoil. Accepting this paradox allows one to appreciate that the path to healthier connections demands confronting discomfort rather than avoiding it. Only through conscious examination and therapeutic exploration can the unconscious cast off the outdated script, paving the way for novel patterns that reflect present reality rather than past trauma. The magnetic pull of toxic attraction emerges from the unconscious mind's inclination to gravitate toward familiar emotional terrains, even when they promise pain rather than fulfillment. These gravitational forces originate in early relational templates, internalized patterns formed through interactions with primary caregivers. A person whose caregiver was emotionally inconsistent may develop an internal blueprint equating love with unpredictability. As an adult, this blueprint magnetizes the individual toward partners who mirror those erratic dynamics, offering fleeting warmth followed by withdrawal or criticism. The unconscious recognizes these partners as right because they replicate the emotional ebb and flow once experienced, however distressing that original rhythm might have been. Emotional unavailability stands among the most potent attractors in repetition compulsion cycles. The initial encounter with a distant or aloof partner often triggers an unconscious challenge to penetrate the barrier and win affection. This challenge parallels a childhood struggle to earn parental approval. In early life, the child may have tried every strategy, pleasing behavior, achievements, caretaking to elicit consistent attention. When those efforts failed, the child internalized the message that love required constant striving. As an adult, encountering an unavailable partner activates that same striving dynamic. The unconscious prods the person to persist in broken promises of affection, perpetuating self-doubt and reinforcing the original trauma. Similarly, individuals may feel drawn to partners who exhibit harsh criticism or judgment, unconsciously seeking to resolve internalized voices of parental disapproval. The original critic in the child's life, perhaps a demanding parent or teacher, instilled a belief that nothing the child did was sufficient. That belief lodged itself in the superego as a harsh internal monitor. In adult relationships, choosing a critical partner feels like an opportunity to negotiate with that superego voice externally. The conscious mind may rationalize the attraction, I value high standards, but the unconscious drive finds comfort in criticism because it echoes the internalized parental tone. Each critique from the partner momentarily validates the superego, creating a paradoxical sense of familiarity even as it inflicts emotional pain. Another common attractor involves rescuing or caregiving roles. Individuals from families where they assumed responsibility for a caregiver's emotional needs often find themselves drawn to partners who require constant support. The unconscious seeks to reenact the caregiving dynamic, hoping for a reversal of roles, this time mastering the situation and earning reciprocal care. Yet the repetition compulsion disregards reciprocal potential. Even if the partner occasionally reciprocates, underlying patterns compel them to revert to dependency. The rescuer remains locked in a cycle of caretaking exhaustion, replaying the original childhood overinvestment in another's well-being. In relationships marked by betrayal or infidelity, the compulsion to choose unfaithful partners speaks to an unconscious attempt to recreate and resolve feelings of abandonment. The betrayal reawakens early experiences of neglect or perceived rejection. Even when warning signs emerge or past betrayals are clear, the individual unconsciously embraces the partner's unpredictability as an invitation to master the original wound. The cycle persists because each new betrayal momentarily reopens sorrow, followed by hope for restitution, mimicking the original ambivalence felt toward a caregiver who was both protective and neglectful. Familiar conflict patterns also draw individuals toward partners who trigger the same emotional reactions that once defined their childhood environment. If a person grew up in a household where conflict was resolved through emotional withdrawal, they might unconsciously seek partners who respond to disagreements by shutting down. This pattern grants a familiar closure, silence, and emotional distance rather than genuine resolution. The unconscious craves that predictable outcome, so the person remains attached to partners who replicate the avoidance style, even when it leads to chronic dissatisfaction. The intensity of initial attraction often disguises the toxic magnetic pull. The excitement, chemistry, and profound sense of recognition override cautious appraisal. From a Freudian perspective, this blend of excitement and anxiety relates to the interplay between the life instincts and the death drive. The life instincts seek union and pleasure, whereas the death drive gravitates toward familiar pain, offering a twisted sense of safety and repetition. The initial attraction becomes a battleground between these instinctual forces, and because the unconscious script originates with the death drive's quest to resolve trauma through reenactment, the pull toward toxicity often triumphs. Signs of toxic attraction can include feeling inexplicably compelled to return to a partner after a breakup, experiencing chronic guilt for breaking up, or interpreting abusive behavior as a testament to deep passion. Rationalizations, they only lash out because they care so much, serve as defense-driven explanations to maintain the relationship. These rationalizations reflect denial of the partner's harmful pattern and projection of one's own needs onto the partner as evidence of love. Each return to the cycle reinforces the underlying compulsion, sustaining the magnetic attraction. The unconscious pull remains formidable until illuminated by insight. As the individual recognizes the uncanny familiarity of the partner's toxicity, a crucial shift occurs. The dissonance between conscious desire for a healthy relationship and unconscious drive toward repetition becomes too glaring to ignore. Awareness of this split creates an internal tension that can catalyze change. The person begins to question the so-called chemistry and tests its origin. Is it genuine mutual attraction, or a reenactment of an outdated script? This critical questioning weakens the magnetic field exerted by the unconscious, opening space for conscious selection of healthier patterns. Yet insight alone seldom suffices. The unconscious compulsion retains momentum, exerting pressure even after conscious recognition. To counteract the toxic pull, individuals often require structured interventions such as therapeutic support, social accountability, or behavioral experiments that introduce new relational experiences. By consciously seeking partners with contrasting relational qualities, consistent warmth, emotional availability, respectful boundaries, the individual rewires emotional expectations. Each successful experience with a healthy partner creates a new imprint that competes with the old compulsion script. Ultimately, breaking the magnetic pull of toxicity involves understanding that the allure of harmful partners springs from an unconscious loyalty to past trauma. The task then becomes reorienting loyalty toward present safety and genuine connection. As new experiences accumulate, the repetition compulsion loses its grip, and the magnetic field shifts from toxic cycles to mutually satisfying relationships. The heavy pull toward familiar pain transforms into a gentle attraction toward authenticity, marking the beginning of truly fulfilling relational life. Uncovering the original trauma template requires a methodical excavation of past relational experiences. The process begins with constructing a chronological relationship map, listing significant partnerships and their defining emotional dynamics. Each entry notes the partner's key behaviors: withdrawal, criticism, rescuing, and the individual's corresponding reactions, such as anxiety, compliance, or rage. By examining this map, recurring themes emerge. Perhaps every partner oscillated between affection and rejection, or consistently engaged in controlling behaviors. Recognizing these patterns reveals the script the unconscious mind has repeatedly cast the individual in, exposing the blueprint of unsatisfying relationships. Next, the individual drills deeper into a representative relationship cycle, selecting one partnership that embodies the core pattern. They reconstruct the progression from initial attraction through fluctuation of closeness and distance, finally culminating in disillusionment. At each phase, the person notes specific triggers: an unexpected withdrawal of attention, a harsh reprimand, a lapse in emotional responsiveness, and their internal response. This micro-analysis of a single relationship illuminates the sequence of emotional beats that replay the original trauma, pinpointing precise moments when the unconscious drive takes control. Once the sequence is mapped, the person ventures further back, searching for childhood parallels. They recall early attachments, family, caregivers, teachers, and identify moments when affection was inconsistent or conditional. A parent who praised achievements but ignored the child's sadness establishes a pattern of love contingent on performance. A caregiver who alternated between warmth and anger embeds unpredictability into the child's emotional core. By mapping these childhood episodes alongside adult relationship stages, the individual uncovers direct lineages between past trauma and present repetition. The withdrawal of a parent echoes a partner's emotional distancing. A caregiver's harsh rebuke parallels a lover's criticism. These echoes underscore the unconscious fidelity to the original script. Complementing this historical reconstruction, the person interviews close friends or siblings who witnessed formative relationships. External observers often recall the child's emotional struggles with greater objectivity. A childhood friend might remember how the individual sought approval through overachievement, or how they reacted when affection was withheld. These recollections add third-party perspective, enriching the internal narrative and highlighting defenses, such as denial: "I never realized how anxious I felt when mom was upset," or projection: "I thought dad was angry with me, but it was his own frustration." Integrating these external memories fosters a more complete understanding of the early trauma template. Simultaneously, the individual examines recurring fantasies and daydreams for unconscious content. Perhaps they find themselves imagining scenarios of rescue or betrayal, replaying the relational dynamics that first wounded them. These fantasies often occur in moments of stress or loneliness, signaling unmet needs rooted in the original trauma. By journaling these daydreams, detailing settings, emotions, and desired outcomes, the person accesses symbolic representations of the unconscious script. The repeated themes of rescue, criticism, or abandonment within fantasies mirror the external relationships chosen, reinforcing the connection between inner narrative and relational behavior. Further insight arises by analyzing attachment styles through the lens of repetition compulsion. A preoccupied attachment, characterized by anxiety and clinginess, often reflects early experiences of inconsistent caregiving. Conversely, an avoidant attachment marked by emotional distance may stem from early rejection or neglect. By assessing their own attachment patterns, observing how they seek or evade intimacy, the individual sees how these inherited styles perpetuate the trauma template. Recognizing the attachment style illuminates not only which patterns recur, but also the unconscious strategies used to manage relational anxiety. Dream analysis offers another rich source of past pattern spotting. Dreams often symbolically dramatize unresolved conflict. A recurring dream in which someone chases the dreamer, then vanishes, may symbolize the childhood chase for parental attention and its ultimate withdrawal. A dream of being locked in a room may echo feelings of entrapment under a caregiver's authority. By recording and reflecting on these dreams with a Freudian mindset, the individual deciphers metaphoric cues pointing to the foundational trauma. Integrating dream content with the relationship map strengthens awareness of the unconscious script symbols and key emotional beats. A complementary step involves tracing emotional triggers in daily life. Moments of intense reaction, jealousy, defensiveness, fear, serve as micro-replays of past wounds. By noting these triggers in a relationship journal, the person identifies specific stimuli that activate the trauma template: partner's silence, delayed responses to messages, mild criticism from a friend. Each trigger functions like a tripwire, setting off the unconscious pattern. Recording the trigger, the immediate emotion, and the unconscious belief, "I'm unloved if unseen," begins to dismantle the automatic reenactment, laying bare the raw material of repetition compulsion. The final component in spotting past patterns entails synthesizing these data points into a coherent narrative of the original trauma template. The individual writes a summary: the childhood pattern of conditional love, the defense mechanisms that emerged, denial of unworthiness, projection of self-criticism onto others, and the adult relationship cycle that replayed these dynamics. This narrative serves as a conflict myth, clarifying how past and present intermingle. With this cohesive story, the unconscious script no longer remains fragmented and opaque, but becomes a recognizable drama whose outcome can be consciously rewritten. Through this systematic archaeological dig, charting relationship maps, micro-analyzing a representative cycle, excavating childhood parallels, consulting external witnesses, exploring fantasies and dreams, assessing attachment styles, logging emotional triggers, and crafting a narrative, the individual spots the repeating patterns that have trapped them in unsatisfying relationships. Awareness of this trauma template equips them to confront and interrupt repetition compulsion, setting the stage for transformative work in the following sections. Freud's methods for interrupting repetition compulsion center on introducing conscious choices that counteract the unconscious pull toward familiar but unhealthy dynamics. The first strategy involves cultivating desire clarity, a practice in which the individual consciously distinguishes between genuine relational needs and unconscious reenactment impulses. By compiling a list of authentic desires, emotional availability, mutual respect, dependable support, the person creates a relational wish list grounded in present values rather than past wounds. Whenever attraction to a new partner surfaces, this wish list serves as a litmus test. Does the emerging connection align with conscious desires, or does it echo elements of the original trauma script? This practice hampers the compulsion's magnetic field by providing clear criteria against which every potential partner is evaluated. A second technique leverages behavioral experiments, small-scale interactions designed to test unconscious assumptions. For example, if an individual unconsciously expects criticism, they might propose a low-stakes scenario, asking for feedback on a minor project from a trusted friend or mentor, and observe the response. If the feedback proves constructive rather than punitive, the person gathers evidence that contradicts the traumatic template. Over time, accumulating disconfirming experiences weakens the compulsion's authority, gradually reshaping unconscious expectations. Behavioral experiments thus replace passive repetition with active testing, empowering the individual to rewrite relational narratives. In parallel, Freud's concept of working through encourages engaging in reflective partnerships or therapy sessions to explore emerging patterns. Here, the individual shares observations from desire clarity and behavioral experiments with a trained professional or supportive peer. This reflective dialogue dissects each enacted pattern, examines feelings of guilt or anxiety, and unpacks moments of slipping back into old scripts. The process of articulating experiences, receiving empathetic feedback, and analyzing unconscious motives heightens self-awareness. As insights accumulate, the repetition compulsion loses its invisibility, surrendering control to the conscious ego. A complementary strategy invokes symbolic enactment to disrupt underlying relational archetypes. The individual writes a brief narrative in which they reimagine the original trauma scene, altering the roles, outcomes, and emotional tones. For instance, a childhood memory of emotional abandonment might be rewritten to include a caring figure offering comfort. Performing this symbolic reenactment, whether through writing, art, or role play, allows the unconscious mind to experience a corrective emotional event. The new symbolic outcome imprints a fresh relational template, challenging the compulsion to default to the old script. Another Freudian approach utilizes transitional objects to foster emotional security outside of relationships. A carefully chosen object such as a journal, piece of art, or memento serves as a stand-in for external validation, buffering anxiety during moments of uncertainty. When the individual feels pulled toward a familiar but toxic partner, they consciously turn to the transitional object, acknowledging its role in fulfilling a longing that would otherwise drive the compulsion. Over time, reliance on secure internal resources diminishes the need to seek validation through reenacted trauma patterns. Establishing clear emotional boundaries constitutes a crucial intervention. The individual practices asserting personal limits early in relational interactions, stating needs and preferences without deferring to unconscious fears. For instance, if a prospective partner cancels plans last minute, the person calmly communicates disappointment and proposes alternative arrangements, rather than tolerating repeated cancellations as a test of loyalty. This boundary practice interrupts the compulsion cycle of tolerating mistreatment, signaling to the unconscious mind that repeated abandonment no longer yields the familiar comfort of reenactment. Freud's notion of sublimation provides another powerful tool. The psychological energy fueling the compulsion, often frustration, anger, or longing, can be redirected into creative or altruistic pursuits. An individual might channel the urge to rescue a needy partner into volunteer work supporting vulnerable populations, or they could pour the desire for approval into artistic expression, transforming unmet childhood needs into productive creativity. Sublimation honors the intensity of unconscious impulses while diverting them from harmful relational reenactment into socially beneficial channels. Regular sensory awareness or mindfulness practices further support breaking the loop. By noticing bodily sensations, heart rate, muscle tension, breathing, when relational urges arise, the individual gains early warning of the compulsion's activation. This somatic cue prompts a pause, allowing conscious reflection on whether the attraction aligns with desire clarity or repeats the trauma script. Mindful pauses empower the ego to intervene before unconscious drives take over, fostering a habit of conscious decision-making in relational contexts. Integrating peer accountability circles adds a communal dimension to these strategies. Small groups of friends or former clients agree to support one another's efforts to break repetitive cycles. Members share updates on new attractions, review progress with behavioral experiments, and offer candid feedback when someone seems drawn toward a familiar but unhealthy pattern. This collective oversight reinforces commitment to conscious choice and counters the isolation that often accompanies repetition compulsion. Finally, a long-term commitment to periodic relapse drills acknowledges that breaking deep-seated scripts may involve setbacks. By planning for these moments, identifying warning signs, preparing coping strategies, and scheduling rapid self-inquiry sessions, the individual transforms relapses into opportunities for renewed insight. Each relapse drill begins with recognizing the slip, documenting the triggers and responses, and applying desire clarity and boundary practices to regain conscious control. Over successive drills, the compulsion's power steadily diminishes as each intervention recalibrates the unconscious toward healthier relational templates. Through these Freudian-inspired strategies, desire clarity, behavioral experiments, working through symbolic enactment, transitional objects, emotional boundaries, sublimation, mindful awareness, peer accountability, and relapse drills, individuals can systematically interrupt the unconscious loop of repetition compulsion. Each technique targets a different facet of the compulsion's grip, collectively enabling the emergence of conscious choice in relationship selection. The cycle of toxic attraction gives way to authentic connections grounded in present reality and genuine emotional fulfillment, marking the beginning of a new relational chapter. Freud's vision of reshaping relational destiny hinges on creating new neural and psychological pathways that supplant the outdated trauma script. The first advanced strategy involves deliberate new association forging, in which the individual pairs previously triggering relational cues with positive experiences and cognitive reframes. For instance, if a partner's delayed text response once activated fears of abandonment, the person schedules a neutral activity, such as a short walk or journaling session, immediately upon detecting the trigger. During the activity, they practice affirmations like, "Their delay does not signify abandonment. I can tolerate uncertainty," forging an alternative association between delayed response and personal resilience. Over repeated pairings, the nervous system learns to default toward these new, adaptive interpretations instead of original anxiety-driven ones. Simultaneously, engaging in novel relational experiments exposes the individual to partners outside the old template's gravitational pull. This might mean attending social gatherings beyond familiar friend circles, or exploring online communities that value steady communication and emotional transparency. By interacting with individuals who embody contrasting attachment styles, such as securely attached people who consistently respond, one accumulates evidence disconfirming the compulsion's premise. Each successful exchange cements a fresh relational prototype in the psyche, training the unconscious to recognize and seek healthy patterns. A third technique, companion manifesto creation, requires writing a detailed description of desired relational dynamics, far richer than a simple wish list. The manifesto captures sensory details, tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, and emotional textures, warmth, mutual curiosity, respectful conflict resolution. By vividly imagining and documenting these qualities, The unconscious mind receives a compelling blueprint of the preferred relational script. Daily reading and imagining the manifesto as if it were reality habituates the mind to new patterns, making them increasingly accessible and magnetic. Another essential strategy draws from Freud's insight into transference, transforming transference relationships by redirecting unconscious relational projections onto therapeutic or symbolic figures. Instead of reenacting the childhood trauma script with a new partner, the individual practices transferring those projections onto a neutral symbolic figure, such as a statue, painting, or fictional character, during reflective sessions. By consciously attributing internalized expectations of abandonment or criticism to the symbol, the person gains experiential distance. This separation erodes the compulsion's hold as the unconscious script plays out safely within the symbolic space rather than in actual relationships. Complementing these strategies, core belief restructuring targets the deeper cognitive schemas underpinning repetition compulsion. Once the trauma template is identified, the individual lists the core dysfunctional beliefs: I am unlovable, affection is conditional, I must earn love through struggle. Through cognitive restructuring techniques, each belief is challenged and replaced with balanced alternatives. I am inherently worthy of love, healthy love flows freely, I deserve kindness without proving myself. Repeating these reframes daily, ideally paired with emotional visualization of experiences that validate them, gradually rewrites the unconscious narrative. The new beliefs scaffold healthier relational expectations, diminishing the compulsion's power. Freud's concept of ego bolstering through self-object support introduces structured relationships with supportive figures whose sole role is to model secure affection. These designated self-objects, mentors, close friends, or support group members, maintain consistent positive engagement, offering scheduled check-ins, empathetic listening, and non-judgmental feedback. Regular doses of secure connection with these self-objects retrain the unconscious mind to anticipate and accept dependable care. Over time, the individual internalizes these experiences, forming an inner secure base that lessens the unconscious hunger for familiar but toxic interactions. Pattern interweaving, another advanced tactic, involves combining multiple interventions seamlessly into daily life. For example, at the first sign of compulsion activation, the individual refers to their companion manifesto, engages in a 5-minute behavioral experiment, then practices a symbolic enactment with a transitional object, followed by a quick journal entry capturing the new associations. By interwoven application, the mind encounters a multifaceted corrective experience every time the old script attempts to trigger. This synergy accelerates the dismantling of repetition compulsion as each element reinforces the others. A final cornerstone of rewiring is ritualized milestone marking. Each time the individual successfully resists the compulsion, choosing a partner aligned with their manifesto, setting a clear emotional boundary, or completing a behavioral experiment, they perform a small symbolic ritual. This ritual might involve lighting a candle, placing a stone on a mandala, or sending a gratitude note to a supportive confidant. These embodied ceremonies signal to the unconscious that a new relational pattern has been enacted and celebrated. The repeated rituals embed the new blueprint into procedural memory, making healthy choices increasingly automatic. Instituting these advanced strategies requires steadfast commitment and self-compassion. The individual may maintain a relational growth journal, documenting each new association forged, novel experiment undertaken, manifesto reflections, transference exercises, belief restructurings, self-object sessions, pattern interweaves, and milestone rituals. Periodic review of the journal reveals measurable progress, reinforcing motivation. In parallel, occasional booster sessions with therapists or accountability partners ensure strategies remain tailored and effective. Ultimately, the rewiring process fosters an emergent relational identity, one not defined by past trauma, but by present autonomy and resilience. As new neural pathways solidify through repeated practice, decisions guided by desire clarity and supported by strategic interventions supplant the old unconscious script. Formerly stuck relationship cycles give way to dynamic, fulfilling connections characterized by mutual attunement, balanced boundaries, and authentic intimacy. Freud's century-old insights thus find fresh vitality, empowering individuals to transcend repetition compulsion and co-create relationships anchored in conscious choice and emotional well-being.